You pull into the driveway, engine off. You grab your travel mug, your phone, the mail you forgot to bring in yesterday. You lock the door and walk away. That's usually the moment your car starts talking. Not while you were driving. That part most people sort of expect. When folks picture their vehicle collecting information, they picture it happening while the wheels are turning. Speed, braking, where you went. That's the mental image almost everybody has. But on a lot of modern vehicles, the largest single transmission of the day happens after you're already inside the house with your shoes off. Because the car has been holding something, building it quietly the entire trip. And when the ignition goes off and the vehicle settles into what engineers call a sleep state, one module stays awake just long enough to package everything up and push it out through a piece of plastic on your roof about the size of a bar of soap. You've looked at that piece of plastic 1,000 times. You've washed around it at the car wash. You have probably never once wondered what's underneath it. Here's the part almost nobody explains. That fin on your roof is not one antenna. It's a housing. Inside it, there are several separate antennas sharing one shell, feeding completely different systems inside your vehicle. 3 of those systems matter to you as an owner. They gather different things. They answer to different rules, and exactly one of them has a federal law that says the data belongs to you. 3 systems, 1 antenna. Most owners have never been told the difference. I'm Ellen. I spent better than 30 years inside the American automotive world, first as an engineer and later on the consumer side, reading regulatory filings for a living. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not your financial advisor. What I do is take apart how systems work and then show you where the pressure lands on the person in the driveway. Before we get into it, I put together something called What the Record Actually Says About Your Car. It's yours to download, links in the description, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Now, let's open up the fin. Lift the headliner on most vehicles built in the last 10 or 12 years, and you'll find a bundle of thin coaxial cables running up the rear pillar to that roof housing. Not one cable, several. Each one carries a different radio signal to a different box somewhere inside the cabin. One of those cables is satellite radio. That's the easy one. Nobody's worried about that one. One is a satellite receiver. And here I mean the positioning kind. The industry term is GNSS, which stands for Global Navigation Satellite System. That's just the broader family that GPS belongs to, along with the Russian, European, and Chinese equivalents. Modern receivers listen to several of them at once, which is why your position fix is far tighter than it was 15 years ago. One is cellular, an actual mobile data connection, the same kind of signal your phone uses. And on newer vehicles, you'll find Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in there too, sometimes a short-range radio called ultra-wideband that handles things like phone as key. So the fin is a junction. Multiple radios, one enclosure, aerodynamically shaped so it doesn't whistle at highway speed. That's genuinely why it looks like that. It's a drag and wind noise solution before it's anything else. What matters is what's on the other end of those cables. That's where the 3 systems live. Let's take them one at a time. System 1 is the Telematics Control Unit. In the trade, it usually gets called the TCU, or sometimes the Connectivity Module, or the T-Box, depending on which supplier's documentation you're reading. Telematics, that just means data your car sends and receives over a network. Here's the thing, people find hard to accept the first time they hear it. The TCU is, functionally, a phone. It has a cellular modem in it. On many vehicles, it has an actual SIM embedded on the circuit board rather than in a slot, but a SIM. It has a processor. It has memory of its own. On a lot of designs, it has a small backup battery so that emergency calling still works if the main battery gets knocked loose in a crash. And it's wired directly into the vehicle's internal networks, the buses that carry messages between the engine controller, the transmission, the body module, the brake system, the airbag controller. Those networks were originally built so modules could talk to each other. The TCU sits on them and listens. So what does it listen for? Depends entirely on the vehicle and on what services are switched on. But the general categories are consistent across the industry. Position and heading, ignition on and ignition off events, trip start and trip end times, odometer, speed, fuel or state of charge, diagnostic trouble codes, tire pressure warnings, seat belt status, and on many systems, acceleration and braking events above certain thresholds. Now, the part about parking. A cellular connection costs money to keep open. It costs power. It costs data. No engineer designs a system that streams every parameter continuously if it doesn't have to, and for most consumer vehicles, it doesn't have to. So the common design pattern is buffering. The module gathers data during the trip into its own local memory and then transmits in batches. Some events go immediately. A crash notification, obviously, goes immediately. But the ordinary housekeeping, the trip summary, the diagnostics, the mileage that frequently goes out at key-off, when the vehicle is stationary, when the connection is stable, and when nobody's touching anything. Actually, let me back up because I want to be precise here and not overclaim. This varies by manufacturer, by model year, by which services you have active, and by whether you ever accepted the connected services terms in the first place. I can't tell you what your specific vehicle does on your specific driveway. Nobody can from the outside. What I can tell you is that batched key-off reporting is a standard, documented architecture in this industry, and that if your vehicle has an active connected service, something is very likely going out after you shut the door. That's System 1, the one with a cellular modem and a memory of the whole trip. System 2 is different in kind, and this is the one that surprises people the most. System 2 is the infotainment head unit, the screen in your dash. That thing is not a radio. It's a computer running an operating system with storage, and it has been quietly accumulating a record of every phone that ever paired to it. When you connect your phone by Bluetooth, your phone offers up permissions, contacts, so the car can read names when someone calls, call history, so the screen can show recent calls. On many systems, text messages, so the vehicle can read them aloud. You tap Accept because you want hands-free calling and you're standing in a parking lot and it's 40 seconds of your life. What happens next is that a copy gets written to the vehicle, your contact list, your recent calls, incoming and outgoing with timestamps. On some systems, message content, the unique hardware identifier of your phone. And separately, from the navigation side, your destinations, your searches, your saved places, and depending on the system, a running set of location points. That data sits in the head unit storage. It doesn't necessarily leave. On many vehicles, a lot of it never goes anywhere at all, but it stays. There's an entire forensic industry built on exactly this. Specialized hardware and software exists, sold to law enforcement and to accident investigators, whose whole purpose is pulling data out of vehicle infotainment and telematics modules. Contacts, call logs, messages, device identifiers, location history, door open and close events, ignition cycles. It's a mature commercial product category. It's not a rumor and it's not a theory. The companies that make these tools publish about them openly. Here's a moment I want you to picture, because it makes this concrete. You're at an airport rental counter on a Tuesday afternoon. 20 minutes into the drive, you pair your phone so you can take a call hands-free. You tap Accept on the permissions prompt without reading it because there's a truck behind you. 4 days later, you drop the keys in a box and fly home. Your entire contact list is still in that car, so is the log of who called you that week. The next renter can scroll it if they know where to look. And that vehicle will go to auction in 18 months, and whoever buys it inherits whatever nobody ever wiped. That's not a hypothetical risk. That's the default state of a rental fleet. And here's the legal wrinkle that matters. System 2, the head unit, is not covered by the one federal protection people always cite. I'll get to why in a second. System 3 is the event data recorder, the black box. This is the one most viewers have actually heard of. And it's also the one most commonly misunderstood, because people assume it's the thing recording everything. It isn't. It's the narrowest of the three by a wide margin. The Event Data Recorder is defined in Federal Regulation Part 563 of Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Under that definition, an EDR records the vehicle's dynamic data during a very short window just before or during a crash event, speed against time, change in velocity, throttle position, brake application, seatbelt status, airbag deployment timing, steering input on some vehicles. And it only writes when something triggers it. The regulation sets that trigger. A change in the vehicle's forward velocity of 8 kilometers per hour or more within 150 milliseconds. In plain terms, roughly 5 miles per hour of speed change in about a sixth of a second. That is a collision or something extremely close to one. It is not your commute. The recording window is measured in seconds. A handful of seconds before the event, a fraction of a second during, then it stops. The regulation also specifically excludes audio and video. An EDR under this definition does not record sound and does not record images. So the black box is real. It's in nearly every new passenger vehicle, and it is dramatically smaller in scope than the folklore around it. If somebody tells you the black box has been logging your daily driving for years, they've confused System 3 with System 1. Those are completely different pieces of hardware doing completely different jobs. Now, here's why System 3 matters far out of proportion to how little it records. Because it's the only one of the three with a federal ownership law attached. The Driver Privacy Act of 2015 was signed as part of the larger Surface Transportation Act, House Resolution 22. It says something remarkably plain for a piece of federal law. Data retained by an event data recorder is the property of the owner of the vehicle, or the lessee if it's leased, regardless of when the vehicle was built. And that data may not be accessed by anyone else except under specific conditions, a court order, owner consent, a safety research use with identifying information stripped, and a few others. That's a real protection. Write that one down. But read the definition it points to. It points to Part 563, which means it covers the crash recorder and only the crash recorder. It does not cover your infotainment head unit. It does not cover your telematics module. The forensic tool vendors say this out loud in their own published material because it's the operative distinction in their business. So the law says the 8 seconds around a crash belong to you. The law is silent on the 4 years of trip summaries and the copy of your contact list. Ownership and control are not the same thing. That gap right there is the whole story of this video. All right, let's look at the receipts, because this is where it stops being theoretical. In 2024, reporting by the New York Times described how driving data from General Motors vehicles gathered through a feature called OnStar Smart Driver had been reaching data brokers, specifically LexisNexis Risk Solutions and Verisk, which in turn supplied information used by insurance companies. Smart Driver was presented to owners as a driving habits feature, a score, seatbelt use, hard braking, hard acceleration, that kind of thing, framed as something for the driver's own benefit. In April of 2024, GM ended the Smart Driver program across all of its brands, unenrolled customers, and said it had ended those third-party telematics relationships. Then the Federal Trade Commission filed a complaint, announced in January of 2025. The FTC alleged that GM used a misleading enrollment process, that it failed to clearly disclose that precise location and driving behavior data was being collected, and that it sold that data to third parties without proper consent. On January 14th of 2026, the Commission finalized the order. Under it, GM and OnStar are barred for 5 years from disclosing consumers' precise geolocation and driver behavior data to consumer reporting agencies. They're required to obtain affirmative express consent before collecting, using, or disclosing that data. They have to provide a way to opt out. The overall order runs 20 years. 2 things I have to be straight with you about, because this is exactly where channels get sloppy. First, a consent order is a settlement. It resolves allegations. It is not a jury finding that everything in the complaint was proven true. Those are different things, and I'm going to treat them differently. Second, there are separate lawsuits filed by state attorneys general, Texas, Arkansas, Nebraska, and a consumer suit in Florida. The Texas filing, from August of 2024, alleges data was collected from more than 14 million vehicles and involved more than 1.8 million Texans. Those are allegations in a complaint. A complaint is a set of claims a party intends to prove. It is not a verdict. If somebody quotes you that 14 million number as established fact, they're skipping a step. What is fully established is the FTC order itself. That's a public document, finalized, on the record. And there's one detail buried in it that I think is the most useful thing in the whole proceeding for you as an owner. The order treats your vehicle identification number, your VIN, as reasonably linkable to you, meaning data tied to a VIN doesn't count as anonymous. That matters enormously, because we only share de-identified data has been the standard industry answer for years. The VIN was the loophole. Strip the name, keep the VIN, call it anonymous. A regulator has now said in writing that this doesn't hold up. That's a genuine shift, and it's the kind of thing that sets a reference point far beyond one company. Don't take my word for any of it. Go to the FTC's own site, find the press release dated January 14, 2026, on the General Motors and OnStar matter. The order is posted. It is dry, and it is short, and it will tell you more than any headline about it did. Now let me argue the other side for a minute, because a channel that never does that isn't worth watching. None of these systems were built to spy on you. That's not the origin story, and pretending otherwise is lazy. The telematics module exists because of automatic crash notification. A vehicle that can call for help when the airbags fire, in a ditch, at night, when the occupants are unconscious, that saves lives, and there's decent evidence it does. Everything else got built on top of that foundation because the hardware was already there and the marginal cost of another feature was near zero. Remote start from your phone, stolen vehicle recovery, over-the-air software updates that fix defects without a service appointment, diagnostic alerts that catch a failing component before it strands you. Those are real conveniences that real owners asked for and continue to pay for. The infotainment head unit copies your contacts because you want the car to say, "Your daughter is calling," instead of reading you 10 digits. That's the feature working exactly as designed. And honestly, part of the industry's argument on data is fair. Aggregated vehicle data has improved crash safety, exposed defect patterns earlier than customer complaints ever did, and given engineers real-world information they used to have to guess at. I've sat in rooms where that data settled an argument that would otherwise have been settled by whoever spoke loudest. The problem was never that the systems exist. The problem is the distance between what an owner thought they were agreeing to at a dealership desk and what was actually happening downstream. That's a consent problem, not a technology problem. And the FTC order reads exactly like a consent problem. The disclosure, the enrollment process, the consent, that's what the document is about. Here's where I'll mark my own opinion clearly, because you should be able to tell the difference. My read is that this data was always going to end up priced into insurance eventually, because the incentive is too strong not to. There's no evidence of some coordinated plan among these companies. There is a great deal of evidence of aligned incentives, and aligned incentives don't need a plan. So what do you actually do? Because a video that only makes you uneasy is a waste of your afternoon. 5 things, in order of how much they're worth. 1. Find out whether your vehicle currently has an active connected service, not whether it has the hardware. Nearly everything after roughly the 2015 model year has the hardware. Whether the service is switched on and what's enrolled under it, that's in the manufacturer's app or the account page on the manufacturer's website, or by calling their connected services line with your VIN. Look specifically for anything with the word score, insights, coach, or driving habits in the name. Those are the behavioral features. 2. Ask for your own data. Under several state privacy laws and under the transparency obligations regulators have been pushing, manufacturers have processes for a consumer to request a copy of what's held about them and, in many cases, to request deletion. Look for privacy request or data request on the manufacturer's website. Submit it with your VIN. 2 things happen. You find out what's actually there, which is usually less dramatic and more specific than you expected, and you generate a record that you asked. 3. Clear the head unit before the vehicle leaves your hands, selling it, trading it, returning a lease, returning a rental. In the infotainment settings, look for factory reset, master reset, or delete paired devices. Delete the paired phones, delete stored destinations, delete saved home and work addresses. Do this while the vehicle is still yours. Nobody at the dealership is going to do it for you, and no auction house is going to do it either. 4. Read the enrollment prompt when you buy. This is the least exciting item on the list and probably the most important. The moment where this is decided is a screen at a dealership desk when you're tired and you've been there 4 hours and you want the keys. That's the moment. If a salesperson tells you your safety features won't work unless you enroll in a particular data program, ask them to show you where the manufacturer says that in writing. Ask calmly. Ask anyway. 5. If you're ever in a collision and the event data recorder becomes relevant, know that under the Driver Privacy Act of 2015, that data is your property as owner or lessee, not the insurer's, not the other drivers. Yours, absent a court order or your own consent. Your attorney will know what to do with that. My job is only to make sure you know the protection exists, because a lot of people don't. That's the list. None of it requires spending money, and none of it requires being technical. I want to leave you with the frame rather than the fear, because the fear isn't useful, and the frame is. Your vehicle contains 3 distinct data systems that share one physical exit through the roof. One of them is a modem that summarizes your trips. One is a computer that keeps whatever your phone handed it. One is a crash recorder that writes a few seconds at a time and is the only one Congress has explicitly said belongs to you. Knowing which is the entire defense. It's what lets you ignore the nonsense, and it's what tells you which question to ask and who to ask it of. My own car is 12 years old and I'm in no hurry to replace it. Part of that is stubbornness. Part of it is that I know exactly what's under my roof panel, and I'd like to keep it that way. If this was useful, subscribe, because the next one takes apart what happens to that data once it reaches the broker, and that machinery is stranger than the part inside your car. I'll see you then.